Okay, here's the third and final part of Zhang Zihe using ice water as medicine. So, hello, humans. Anyway, these are just some miscellaneous things that, you know, are shorter, but many more things that are like little short things. Yeah. So, okay, under a section called the vomiting method, and he goes and describes it. He really liked to make people vomit and have bowel movements, have diarrhea and sweat. Those were his primary methods of treating. So here is where he has a theoretical description of the vomiting method, but then he has this case. For women in somebody's house who are sick, all with the same thing, although he doesn't mention what the thing was. They were all sick together. So he gave them all a vomiting prescription at sunset, and he put some braziers in the room to make the room very warm. And at first, the women felt dizzy and faint, and everybody got frightened about it. But Dairen just laughed and said, they're like this because their internal fire is meeting the external fire of the braziers, the hot room. And so then they carried the women outside and made them drink water from ice and snow. So that woke them up. And right at that time, like, I'm not 100% sure of this sentence, but anyway, the snow cleared up, and then Dairen, or maybe it's a word. Where did it go? Sorry. It's hot and tired, and I'm tired in here. Anyway, so the word cleared here means like clear weather. And Dairen said, when heat meets cold, they wake up. And so they were all convinced from this. They were kind of like getting faint when it was all hot. And then he brings them out in the snow and it wakes them right up. And he says, when heat meets cold, they wake up. Then he's telling not those people, but he's telling us, if you're not an expert and proficient at this, you won't be able to suppress everyone's fright. Like they'll get frightened and they'll panic and you won't be able to control it. But because had so much self-confidence, he was able to, even though they were a little afraid, he was able to continue the course of medicine. So that's it. That's really, he's having them drink ice water and snow, which is why I have this here. But his point is that you have to be confident when you're doing weird things so that your clients, your patients will, trust you. Here's another one about someone feeling faint and sleepy for 2 or 3 days. But this isn't actually his case. This is a story. Here they are collecting ice to store in a ice cellar so that they'll have ice for the summer later. Anyway, so somebody was faint and sleepy for 2 or 3 days. She frequently sipped ice water and gradually started eating cold milk curds and sesame drink until she was constantly swallowing, cold milk curds and sesame drink. And after several days, she voraciously ate food and drink again, and her Jing, Shen, and Qi and blood were good as new. Later, she gave birth to 3 sons and she lived until she was 50, in her 50s, which, is a good age back then. So again, this isn't his case, but he heard or she told him the story herself that, sipping ice water kind of revived her from being faint and sleepy. Okay. Here's one for amenorrhea, which in Chinese is literally menstruation closed off, menstrual block. A woman in her 20s suffered amenorrhea or menstrual block. Her menstruation just didn't move. She had alternating fever and chills, cough, and tidal fever. Okay, sounds, Xiaoyang-ish. A quack doctor gave her extreme prohibitions. So basically, there was nothing left that she could eat. One day during the heat of summer, she had to go out. And when she was out, she saw a vendor selling bean jelly, which is some kind of sweet cold treat. She blended it with ice water, okay, and drank a lot of it. And she immediately felt her shen become clear again. She felt her bones become strong and healthy. And then she started menstruating without doing anything else. So normally we worry about cold contracting and stagnating and causing amenorrhea or dysmenorrhea, but here it actually fixed it, according to Zhang Zihe. No, though, this is, the heat of summer. Heat of summer. And she can go into town and there are people selling ice, cold desserts and ice water and stuff like that. So you can see that ice must have been common enough at the time this was written in 12 something. Because this woman doesn't seem to be like, like nobility, or she would probably be inside the, women's quarters and not able to go around doing stuff. So, okay, ice was available to common people, at least in the areas where they had ice in the winter, then they could store it for the summer. Okay, another. A male had dysentery. They used an unusual term for it, but apparently that term Zhang toxins means dysentery with bloody stool. During the 6th lunar month, which would be May, the heat was so unbearable that he wanted to kill himself. So he has dysentery and then it's way too hot, so he wants to kill himself. But he suddenly thought of iced honey water, which must have been a thing then, some sweet thing to drink. And he's strongly resolved to abandon. He thought of this and he was going to abandon his life. He was going to kill himself. But first, he wanted to drink a big jar of this iced honey water. And then, as soon as he did, the pain stopped and the bleeding ceased. So he didn't have to kill himself. Yeah, that's the story. Another dysentery case. Someone suffered malign dysentery. What is that? I don't know, but it's a bad case of it. There's pus and blood in the stool. Dysentery means that there's pus and blood in the diarrhea. The pain was unbearable, like abdominal cramping and so forth. He suddenly saw some sweet melon, a musk melon, maybe it's called tiangua, sweet melon, literally. And he saw some sweet melon soaking in water and he just craved it. He had a strong desire for it. So he ate several pieces of it, including even the skin, and then the pus and blood both stopped. So, cold things as treatment, sometimes like spontaneous treatment without the doctor even prescribing it. Okay, so this goes on. Again, sometimes I'm not 100% sure of my translation. I'm sure there's some errors here, but people say dysentery doesn't have a standard type. The word is literally form. What do they mean? People only know dysentery as deficiency in cold. He's saying that in his time, people always thought dysentery was deficiency in coldness. So they use warming herbs, drying herbs, astringing herbs to try and stop it. And they don't have any other way of dealing with it because of that. He says they should know that it could be wind, summer heat, fire, dampness, dryness, or cold that could become dysentery. So they should have more ways of treating it because it's not only cold and deficient. And so he said that's why the iced honey and sweet melon are effective, because it must have been a summer heat or a fire type, and those would go against that. Yeah, yeah, yeah. So I did find cases where the person did eat or drink cold things and that didn't help and it may have even hurt. So I'm not saying that he liked ice water in every case. Here's a case where he didn't like it. So this is titled Collected Rheum or like phlegm, only thinner. Okay, so like thin fluids, like internal dampness collecting. Okay, so here's the case. When she was young, a woman cried intensely It doesn't say why, and drank a lot of ice water and then lay down to sleep. But this ice water collected below her heart. And so she began to have episodes of painful oppression in that region. And doctors all thought this was a cold accumulation, so they gave her warm and hot prescriptions. They said, don't eat any cold things, no cold foods. As soon as she smelled the aroma of tea, she relapsed. For some reason, tea made her have a relapse. And it was like this for several years. And since they thought it was cold, they used fire needle, they burned mugwort, and they left several thousand sores, like moxa sores or sores from the needle. They just like did this all the time and it didn't help. More than 10 years later, she's been suffering this for 10 years. Her urine became reddish yellow and she became constipated. Her eyes looked muddled. The accumulated water became even more severe and flowed into her rib sides. Everyone called it water craving. So here's this word craving. It can mean addiction. It also can be some kind of accumulation. So it's an accumulation, but it's also related to craving or addiction. Or they called it propping room. So in Zhang Zhongjing's writings, there were 4 types of room, and this is one of the 4 types of room. So they gave her herbs to attack it and grind it down, such as borax and lacquer, which is highly toxic, sunlung, which is a pretty potent herb, and some herb that is called shu, and I couldn't figure out what herb it was. Probably somebody knows, but I didn't know. So they gave her all of these really strong herbs, but her food intake declined each day, and the accumulation, of room inside her, upper abdomen, below her heart, it grew more dense each day. It was located between Ren 15 at the top, the rib sides on the sides, and the umbilicus below. So it's like pretty much the whole middle jiao. During episodes, it made water sounds when pressed, sloshing and stuff like that. Her heart region and abdomen were bound up and hard, and she didn't want to let anyone touch it. She had 5 or 6 episodes per month, and she wanted to die when it was severe. She hated all the medicine. I guess nothing had worked before, and some of the medicine was probably pretty drastic. So this went on for more than 20 years. Poor thing. So finally, she requested herbs from Dairet. He diagnosed her pulse, and only the tsunko was deep and slow. Or the tsunko was only deep and slow, something like that. This was phlegm in her chest. So he used Wadi-san, the melon pedicle, is that what it's called? Powder. It's a formula that makes you vomit. I'm pretty sure it's from Shanghanmun. She vomited out 5 or 7 sheng of phlegm. How much is a sheng? I don't know, but she vomited quite a bit of phlegm. In a few days, he made her again. So he waited a few days for her to recover from that harsh treatment, and then he made her vomit again a dole of phlegm water. So like, wow, she vomited a bunch more. And then a few more days later, he made her vomit a 3rd time, and there was several sheng of it. Oh, that's a typo. He made her vomit and descend. In other words, he induced a bowel movement, a total of 3 times for each. He also made her sweat till water was pouring out of her 3 times. This is something he says in a lot of the cases. He'd make them vomit 3 times, he'd make them have diarrhea 3 times, and he'd make them sweat 3 times, just getting everything out of them. Yeah. The accumulation was completely gone. He then regulated her with herbs to make dampness in room flow and circulate so they're no longer, pathological. And then she was greatly recovered in more than a month. Okay, he's kind of aggressive. I don't think I want him treating me. Okay, so the last two things, I'm pretty sure these are the last two things, are actually not about ice and ice water, but when I was searching, well, this one has some ice water in it. These are different though, and I came across them when I was, searching through the electronic document to find stuff about ice. So here is to treat toothache. Hold a mouthful of ice water in your, mouth. And make a twist of da huang powder in paper. So, basically looks like you're rolling a joint, only inside of it is da huang powder. Okay. I don't know if you've ever paid attention, if you've ever smelled it. I actually like the smell of da huang. It has a nice aromatic, it's a pleasant odor. It's probably, I'm sure it's horribly bitter to taste, but the aroma is pretty pleasant. And in fact, I've come across an incense recipe that uses it as one of the ingredients, not the only ingredient. Okay. So once you make this, twist of paper with the powdered da huang inside, he wants you to sniff it inside the nose on the same side as the pain. So if I have left side toothache, sniff it in the left nostril. And he says they will immediately recover. Worth a try, maybe. And then the last thing, although this is 2 slides, this is kind of fun to treat sores. So if somebody has, some kind of sores on their body, here, it says another method, because this is within a bunch of different methods. Okay, so adults or children suffering from incessant sores, swelling, and cinnabar toxins. Cinnabar toxins is dandu, and that's often erysipelas. That's what books often translate it as, but it's any like intensely hot, bright red skin condition, with fever and pain. So here's what they want you to do. Face due north, focus your mind on the North Sea and snowdrifts towering up to heaven and countless icebergs. So you're visualizing all of this super cold stuff facing north, and you're thinking of all this really cold stuff in the far north, like, in Alaska, in Canada, in the North Pole, in, Manchuria, wherever. And so then you're focusing your mind on the chi of intense bitter coldness from that region. Okay, so yeah, hold on, I want to look at a word. Okay, it doesn't have the flavor bitter. Sorry, I probably should translate it differently. But like, how people call cold bitter cold. So it's not the flavor bitter, but it's, that intense biting cold. Okay. So you're focusing, you're visualizing, you're focusing all of this really cold stuff, and then inhale breath and blow your breath onto the sores or swelling. So you're blowing this cold chi onto the sores or swellings, and then they'll get better. Well, will it work? I don't know. I haven't tried it yet. Of course, this is probably directions for you to do to a patient. And I don't know if your patient wants you blowing on their sores, but, I'm just telling you what Zhang Zihe has in his book. Strongly prohibited for people who use this method. The 5 acrid vegetables, which the list of them varies from place to place, but it's things like garlics, leeks, scallion, and so forth. And the 5 loathsome meats, which I couldn't find a list of 5, but I found like a similar idea that included goose, dog, and turtle. Okay, so no dog before you do this. Dog is supposed to be very hot. And of course, these things are also very hot. Anyway, people who are sick should definitely avoid foods such as chicken, pork, fish, rabbit, alcoholic drinks, vinegar, and moist noodles. If you're somewhere without herbs, you can use this method to help people, right? So, somebody has sores and you are traveling and you don't have your pharmacy with you, you can at least try to breathe the cold north air onto their sores. Okay, so we're done with Zhang Zihe and ice. He had some other cases, but they're just not interesting beyond what we've already seen. So that's it for today.